Right, we have Myers Mermel up next from the Ethan Allen Institute. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Trying to share my screen, but it looks like it's been disabled.
Oh, is it?
I try again.
We have,
You should be all set.
oh yeah, and we do have your testimony. Right.
While I'm doing that. All right, hit hard copies as well, Mr. Pat. Thank you. Yes, my name is Myers Mermel. I'm the president of Ethan Allen. I'm a direct descendant of a Green Mountain boy, a graduate of University of Vermont. I have a degree in history from Columbia University and a degree in divinity from Yale University. I also have a 35-year track record or career in finance in New York City as a real estate investment banker. As I looked at the list of people that will have testified before the committee, which number 33 by tomorrow, I will be the only person with a financial services background. It's addressing the committee. So let me start by quoting Ulysses. "Is there no way," said I, "of escaping Charybdis and at the same time keeping Scylla off when she's trying to harm my men?" If you remember, this is when Ulysses faced a whirlpool on one side and a monster on the other, and had to chart his course through the states of Messina through these very difficult hazards. I think this is a little bit like where we are today. The presentation that I'm embarking on will examine the premises used by Mr. Richard Coward, his affirmative argument for the clean heat standard in his testimony of March 22nd before this committee. Mr. Coward is a Vermont Climate Council member, former chair of the board of directors of BEIC, and current principal of RAP. He has been called, quote, the architect of the Affordable Heat Act. So understanding his argument is vital to understanding the utility of S5 as a policy. At the risk of oversimplification using Aristotelian logic, a valid deductive argument is one where all the premises are true and the conclusion follows. An invalid argument is one where even if the premises are true, the conclusion does not follow. A sound argument is a valid one with true premises, whereas an unsound argument has at least one false premise. It is not possible to have a sound argument with one or more false premises. Some famous unsound policy arguments based on false premises include the invasion of Iraq by President Bush and Prime Minister Blair in the 2000s, which utilized the false premise that Iraqi leadership had control of weapons of mass destruction. Also, the Eugenic Sterilization Act by the Vermont legislature in the 30s utilized the false premise that Vermont's indigenous, disabled, French Canadian, and poor were only capable of birthing idiotic, imbecilic, or feeble-minded children. So going directly to page 18 from Mr. Coward's presentation of last week, the conclusion, he said why we need a clean heat standard. His argument is we need a policy driver to get off the fossil fuel roller coaster and save billion in heat bills. We need a policy driver to deliver large greenhouse gas savings. Equity is built from the outset. Clean heat standard supports the diverse heating solutions, gives Vermonters choices, and performance standards work. On the issue of, or the premise rather, that we need a policy driver to get off the fossil fuel roller coaster and save billions in heat bills, there are two statements. The first part of the premise to test is the fossil fuel roller coaster. Fuel prices have fluctuated, which is true. However, electric prices have only risen and will increase with demand from this new program. On testing the premise, save billions in heat bills, the cost of conversion is the combination of upfront cost and ongoing costs. Savings are not year-to-year costs alone. One must factor in upfront costs as these are consumer costs. The VCC has claimed $6.4 billion of savings from the electric transition. The VCC refuses to release the financial model from the Pathways report. However, announced assumptions include some disturbing errors, and the social cost of carbon section alone, an incorrect discount rate adds over $5 billion in non-existent savings. The 35-year forecast model does not show the replacement of heat pumps in years 15 and 30. This is an important thing to note. Most of these heat pumps are made in Asia and they have a useful life of 10 to 15 years. So these 35-year forecasts should show a scalloped edge or a dip or maybe a rising sine curve as they go forward, but they shouldn't be straight lines. So it's clear the models aren't showing the replacement of these pumps. Additionally, there's an added upfront cost calculated at $2 billion under Secretary Moore's analysis when we believe they are $5 billion. And we have that information in the appendix of this report. Consequently, the program does not save $6.4 billion. It costs at least $800 million. There are no savings ever. The claim of savings is false. On the issue of we need a policy driver or premise, we need a policy driver to deliver large greenhouse gas savings. Incentive loans are not enough. That is true. In 2022 state legislation provided only $80 million of state subsidies to cover a $5 billion program. So incentives are not enough. Public funds and taxes are not reliable enough. Our estimates indicate only federal and state subsidies account for close to 6% of the upfront costs, just $300 million over $5.4 billion. So this claim is true. Businesses need a predictable path. That claim is true. Equity built in from the outset. Representative Logan cut to the quick of ANR Secretary Moore's testimony on March 22nd. A full 63% of Vermont tax filers earn below $68,000 or are classified as low income. How will these low income people be affected? The program directs only 16% of the initial conversions go to low income, leaving 47% of the state, basically half the entire state and its poorest, suffering under new fuel surcharges due to the fact there won't be immediate money to fund their conversions. Representative Smith asked repeatedly, what does a credit cost? Mr. Coward replied, the free market will decide. Cost of a credit is unknown. The cost of credits is not unknown. There's enough information to calculate the consumer cost of credits today. Our calculations in the appendix indicate that the CHS creates an upfront cost of $5 billion, not $2 billion, and these two numbers may be low given the information that Secretary Moore released on the cost of the DDA. If the credits are dollar for dollar money spent on improvement, that means the program needs $5 billion of credits to fund a $5 billion upfront conversion program. For obligated parties to recoup the cost of credits, that translates to a little over $4 per gallon surcharge for the consumer. An average house is said to use 700 gallons of fuel oil per annum, meaning the surcharge will equal $2,800 per household per year. This will generate $2,800 worth of credits for the obligated parties on average. But half the state, the low-income population, will be required to pay the regressive surcharge of $2,800 until such time sufficient credits accumulate and are available to pay the conversions. The payment of this fuel surcharge is not voluntary. Conversions are, quote, not mandated, but the fuel charge is absolutely mandated by the legislation. S5 is basically a circular system which forces low-income Vermonters to pay for their improvements over time. Half of the $5 billion will come from low income. In essence, this program extracts $2.5 billion from Vermont's poorest who don't have the money in the first place. It will create further income inequality and uphold white supremacy per the statement released by the Vermont Renew's BIPOC Council. So the claim that equity is built in is false. Next, examining the claim that CHS supports diverse heating solution gives Vermonters choices. Yes, consumers can choose among a limited number of measures, including weatherization, heat pumps, water heaters, advanced wood heat, and biofuels. Now, if you use fuel oil, there's no choice regarding the fuel surcharge. However, you do have a choice of conversion measures. So that claim is true. Under performance standards work, yes, in regulated industries, performance standards work. This is not a regulated industry, although it will be close to one once the legislation passes. The performance standard will provide 90% of the cost of conversion. To the wealthy upper 20% of Vermonters, these benefits will be gravy, for lack of a better term. But to the low income half of the population, they will not be able to access credits fast enough because the DDA, one, can't fund them first, as the wealthy generate the first initial credits. Two, there are few people to actually perform the skilled labor. And three, the low income can't afford to pay their 10% share of improvements. But low income people will continue to pay the mandatory fuel surcharge, and income inequality will increase as the two-tiered system of climate justice is enforced. As soon as the bill is enacted, all oil heat households, we predict, will lose 35% of their home's equity in our estimate, matching the cost of unfunded conversion. Unintended consequence will be the migration of low-income people out of Vermont and the demolition of historic homes, which can't justify the cost of conversion. In the 1930s, forced sterilization marginalized only 300 people. If this performance standard will marginalize 47% of our population, all low income, numbering over 300,000 people. S5 creates a climate payment system whereby the poor polluters subsidize the rich. Yes, this performance standard will produce consequences and will work. So the claim is true. Now, to summarize the coward claims, we need a policy driver to get off the fossil fuel roller coaster and save billions in heat fuels. We judge that false. We need a policy driver to deliver greenhouse gas savings. That claim is true. Equity built from the outset is false. CHS supports diverse heating solutions, good for Vermonter choices. That is true. Performance standards work. That is true. To summarize, the CHS has three claims which are true. It is a policy driver, it gives limited choices, and it works. The CHS makes two claims which are false, that it saves money and has equity. The true claims are that it both mandates an expensive fuel surcharge and marginalizes the poorest half of our population, which includes low-income white and BIPOC individuals. Mr. Coward's argument supporting implementation of S5 relies on two false claims. It is unsound.
Thank you for your testimony. That was right on 10 minutes.
I was ready for you.
Yeah, you were. Thank you for that. There was a lot in there.
Yes.
But I would say
Unpack.
one thing that caught my eye was the kind of criticism that a heat pump needs to be replaced every 15 to 30 years, but so does a conventional fossil fuel heat system, right? So I don't know, you have to replace your boiler, every 20 years on average, probably.
Yeah, I don't think the lifespan of the boilers are the same. And also people have money invested in current heating fuel systems that are functioning and that have useful life left in them. I mean, that might be an interesting analysis to really, tee up the boiler against the replacement of the heat pump. But, as a leading progressive indicated to me yesterday, I mean, we're on the cusp of a lot of new technology, right? And it's not inconceivable that in 10 or 15 years, we won't be using heat pumps at all. We'll have something else, but that these measures will force people to adopt these heat pumps. And unfortunately, it's the poorest people that are going to suffer under this legislation.
Right. One more. Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, I just have to push back on that.
Why do you want to push back?
Yeah, so
I'm not pushing back on you.
We know that this bill actually is a means, it's targeted to low income and moderate income Vermonters. We know that it is the Vermonters with means right now that are transitioning off, leaving actually those without means and the middle class holding a bag as we're paying 200 or 2 times what we were paying 2 years ago for fossil fuel oil. Some have suggested putting in place a tax, which would even more intently attack both the middle and moderate income here. So, this bill is actually targeted most directly at our low and moderate income folks. So
I agree with that. It is targeting the low income people, and it's forcing them to pay $5,000 on conversion costs that they don't have. And the 16% that's directed, even though it's been adjusted for moderate income, our poorest are going to suffer because they don't have the money for the conversion. They can't pay the ongoing costs.
thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Harry Parker, Northeast Craftsman.
Great. Good afternoon, Representative.
Thank you.
I am not sure who invited me or why. But I'll make the most of my 10 minutes. You probably need to know who I am then. I'm a 6th and 7th generation Vermonter. My family has been in the building materials as a manufacturer, retail for over 128 years. I taught high school, mostly science, for 31 years. And the last 10 years since I stopped teaching, I've run a small remodeling and renovation company, which I did during the summers when I was teaching anyway. I've been motivated to testify to you, 2 reasons. One, actually, Mr. Mel brought up about the workforce that may be available to do this, since I'm part of that workforce. And also weatherization of older homes and workforce is available for new construction even. Plus, I was also motivated emotionally by my own state senator's callous, insensitive remarks about low-income people and this particular bill. While I have well-developed opinions concerning the Climate Council, how they've developed their data, the reliability of that data, the precision and accuracy of that data, I am really going to direct my remarks to two specific requirements here, and how it impacts poor Vermonters. These are some statistics that you as this committee should already be familiar with, but yet I think feels important that we restate. Yeah, 647-ish thousand Vermonters who have a median income of $67,000. There are 331 homes in this state, of which only 262,000 plus or minus are occupied homes. We have the second highest unoccupied, vacant, seasonal second home in the country, Maine's highest. 19% of our housing. Oh, by the way, in the last 10 years, most of the new housing fits this category. 186,000 plus or minus are homeowner occupied, 74% of our housing stock within the median age of construction, 1974. That's important from an energy standpoint, trying to retrofit. The rental situation, about 80,000 plus or minus rental buildings, not units, buildings, have an average age of about 1964 in construction, even more important for the energy considerations of this bill. 60% of our homes are built before 1980. A lot of technology from an energy standpoint wasn't available to the average Vermonter then. I know I used to sell it. 25% of our homes are built before 1939, where most of our low-income people are renting or own. The current cost to buy a home in Vermont, an existing home, is $310,000 on median. A new home cost being driven post-pandemic is $555,000, $500,000. The current workforce to build homes in this state, we build about 2,100 homes a year annually. The next 2 years, we're projected to lose over 2,000 homes, either to destruction or conversion of use. A net gain roughly of about 800 homes a year. That's not going to meet the requirements of the population in this state. In 2010, primary home construction increased about an average of 1% a year in this state. In the next 2 years, it's predicted to be 80% less, to virtual stagnation. And not to mention, we have over 20,000 mobile homes in this state that will never be fitted for weatherization for a heat pump. Maybe for some other alternative forms of, but not to the point of being a pretty good home, according to our trade journal, that will sustain a heat pump efficiently. Current workforce for new construction and weatherization, heat pump installation, updated heat, et cetera. In 1989, we had about 18,000 people in the state in the construction trades. Pre-pandemic, 15,000. 2021, 11,300. I think you see where this trend has gone. We're down 11% from 2019. The average age of the worker in the trades is 45. 30% will be retiring in the next 3 years. That includes me. We have 900 HVAC certified, Vermont certified installers in this state. 138 are certified to install heat pumps. That's all. We have about 1,000 licensed electricians, which goes hand in hand with that, as you know. Now let's just talk about low-income housing just for a moment. Low-income people, we have about 19,000 people as defined by VHFA as having serious quality issues with their homes. 19,000. This is defined by a lack of any heat, lack of a finished kitchen, lack of a finished bathroom, house valued less than $75,000, home without insulation. 90,000 Vermonters, 36% are burdened by housing costs as defined by VHFA. That means a total in their rent, mortgage, insurance, taxes, and utilities is either greater than 30% of their income. 39,000 Vermonters, 15%, 50% of their income goes to those. For the first time ever, my energy costs have exceeded my tax bill this year. Vermont is the 8th most expensive state to live in, mostly because of this. Current workforce projections to meet serious quality issues, just this group of people, just this bunch of housing. Not houses before 1939, not houses before 1974, not new construction, just this. The WAP program, Weatherization Assistance Program, has been mentioned here. Let's talk about that. Established in what, 2010? Last 8 years, from 2015 to 2023, a little over 1,000 homes have been weatherized. That's the average since 2010, about 176 homes a year to address 19,000 homes that need to be weatherized. The average that goes into those weatherizations is $10,000 for a family of 4. That doesn't even come close to trying to meet a home to make an energy standard for a heat pump to work, by the way. Not from a standpoint of heat exchange, air exchange, infrared, it ain't gonna happen. If you apply current workforce that's available to do all of just this sector, you're talking about a very long time. If you do the math, it's over 100 years with the current workforce. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at homes where you just include the pre-1939 homes. And this would include now the RAP program, which has been mentioned, where you repay this, because many of the Vermonters there are going to be median or low middle paying people. They're going to be paying it back. To open all, it's focused mostly on those people. They can project, this is a pilot program, so they've been around for 2 years. About 600 homes could be done a year annually. This is their data. Now, if we just take 50% of the homes before 1939, because we all know that there are some that have been renovated properly, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been put into some of those. We take just 50% of those homes and you use our current workforce, which, by the way, is not going to get much bigger. We have 3 programs in the state to supply workers qualified for this. Over 100 years. Again. Let's look at Burlington's program, which some of you probably saw in last Friday's little blurb that.
Little time check, you only have about a minute and a half.
Sorry, let's do that real fast.
Yeah.
Been around for 2 years, program. They've identified 104 in the rental sector, important to the low income. That's what I'm addressing here. They have weatherized a handful. They are 7 months behind on just the audits, the energy audits for their rental properties. They're already looking at altering their enforcement timeline. Okay, some conclusions. We don't have the workforce to meet the current demands. If we throw in new construction, you could quadruple our workforce and not meet new construction requirements for the 20,000, 30,000. I use actually 30,000. If not in 50 years, you're going to be able to do it. We don't have the workforce of the current rates to meet our climate goals. We don't have the workforce. Losses are not going to be replaced with entry-level people at a rate to meet the losses in the profession. We're not going to get much immigration from outside in because Vermont costs too much to live. Rate's highest. Why would they come from another state where it's cheaper for them to work and they retain more of their money? The Vermont Talent Pipeline Management Survey shows 6 top needs in the construction sector. Not a one of them is in the thermal sector, not one. So they have higher needs, higher demands being placed on them than the thermal sector. I know I'm running out of time, but if these people aren't going to get weatherized, they're going to be paying more for their fossil. They're going to be paying their fossil fuels, and this bill will increase their costs beyond the normal market fluctuations. And they aren't going to be seeing the weatherization or the benefits of that. They're going to be subsidizing other people to do that. Okay, well, if you have any questions, I think I've got about 2 seconds, right?
For your testimony. I have a question about where did you gave us a lot of great
Okay.
statistics. I'm
I
hoping.
don't have a lot of my footnotes. VHFA, the Vermont Department of Labor, Efficiency Vermont, the Vermont Licensing Division, Census, the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment that the PHFA put together for 2020 to 2025, and ARPA, which is delivering most of the funds for a lot of this.
would it be possible for you to submit your testimony to us in record?
In a form that doesn't look like that. Yeah, I suppose I could put it together and get it to your clerk.
That would be great. Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Annette Smith, who's joining us via Zoom.
Hello,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
I'm looking for Annette Smith.
I just came in. You ready for me?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
My name is Annette Smith. I'm Executive Director of Vermonters for a Clean Environment. I'd like to thank the Chair and the Vice Chair for inviting my testimony today on S5. I have prepared a handout that has some images in it, but I'm not planning to do a screen share, so you're welcome to look at those if you like. The Affordable Heat Act proposes to study and eventually establish a complicated system, the Clean Heat Standard, where different technologies and fuels would earn credits determined by the Public Utility Commission using a life cycle analysis model to compute the carbon intensity of each fuel and associated credit-eligible technologies. The PUC's work would come back to the legislature in 2 years, after which the program may or may not go into effect later in 2025, depending on the results of the PUC's evaluation and resolution of the various interpretations about what the checkback language means. This is not the kind of immediate focused action on climate change that Vermonters are demanding. S5's complicated credit market system is the exact opposite of the approach Vermont should be taking in response to the changing climate. The PUC and Associated Department of Public Service evaluation of the Clean Heat Standard is budgeted to cost about $1.75 million. We've heard testimony that heat pumps cost $5,000 and up, weatherization costs $10,000 and up, workforce training costs $125,000 per skilled worker, and state and federal subsidies reduce the upfront costs. How many homes would be weatherized? How many heat pumps could be installed? How many workers could be trained with that $1.75 million? Much has changed since 2020, when the idea of a clean heat standard was first invented by the Clean Heat Working Group, comprised of the Regulatory Assistance Project, Vermont Gas Systems, Energy Action Network, and Energy Futures Group. Since February of 2021, when Richard Cowart of the Regulatory Assistance Project and Don Rendell of Vermont Gas Systems first presented the Clean Heat Standard concept to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, and the idea was inserted into the Climate Action Plan adopted on December 1st of 2021, many of its goals have been achieved. The price of fossil fuels has risen, creating an incentive for customers to switch fuels, and fuel dealers have testified this is happening. Consumers are weatherizing homes. Consumers are adopting heat pumps. The state of Vermont has an Office of Climate, and it's spending more than $250 million on climate-related initiatives. Federal tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act and other federal programs further support consumers' choice to switch fuels. The primary impediment to fuel switching is the lack of a skilled workforce. The circumstances have changed dramatically from when the Clean Heat Standard was first proposed. Now is the time to question whether Vermont needs to pursue this complicated policy idea. The Clean Heat Standard is now being marketed to other states, including Massachusetts and Maryland. Those larger states are better positioned to do the complex evaluations that S5 would require of our PUC. Vermont's PUC is already doing more than most PUCs in the country, including telecom and renewable energy siting. Those issues are handled by local government in other states. As with RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, where a regional approach makes sense because given the high cost of administering credit market programs, Vermont's participation in a clean heat standard, if it is determined to be effective in reducing emissions, would best be on a regional level. The proposed clean heat credit system has been compared to the renewable energy credit market for electricity credits, but that is not an accurate analogy. Representative Jim Maslin and other representatives pointed out the difference in a public comment filed in October of 2022 in the Vermont Gas Systems Renewable Natural Gas Contract case, case at the PUC. And I quote from their letter, "Renewable energy attributes, or RECs, are a construct that enable value to be attached to renewable energy such that the RECs can be traded independent of energy itself. As originally incorporated in Vermont statute, the legislature understood that trading RECs would stimulate the development of new renewable energy to the benefit of Vermonters, or so we believe. What Vermont Gas is proposing will do nothing at all to stimulate new renewable energy. If the petition does anything, it will encourage the development and transport of fracked fossil gas through a misuse of renewable energy trading market and increase the false belief that Vermont Gas is an environmentally responsible player in the quest to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Clearly, legislative intent will have been turned on its head. We should all gasp at the audaciousness of Vermont Gas's proposal. Our Public Utility Commission should immediately turn it aside. And that's signed by Representative Jim Maslin, Sarah Coffey, Jim McCullough, Peter Anthony, Becca White, and Mike Yantachka in October of 2022. The Clean Heat Standard idea has also been compared to Efficiency Vermont, which was Scudder Parker's idea when he worked for the Department of Public Service. A better analogy is electricity deregulation or restructuring, which was promoted throughout New England and the country in the 1990s. That policy was pitched by then Public Service Board Chair Richard Cowart and was adopted by dozens of states. But despite intense pressure to deregulate the utility sector in Vermont, the Speaker of the House stopped it in 1999. Earlier this year, the New York Times published an article evaluating the policy and found that electric rates are higher in the states that deregulated the electric utility sector. The headline is, "Why are energy prices so high? Some experts blame deregulation." Recently, the other deregulated New England states have seen large increases in electric rates. Vermont has not. We can learn from the past that not all ideas are good ideas. Through testimony last year and this year, many issues with this idea of a clean heat standard have been identified and not answered. But we have learned a lot. There is no alternative to kerosene for mobile homes. One propane tank and meter may serve uses other than heating, including fueling backup electric generators and refrigerators. There is no alternative to propane for many consumers. Propane dealers whose sole business is delivering and servicing propane customers will have no option other than to pay the price of the credit and raise the price to all customers. Big companies will survive, small businesses will likely fail. Typical life cycle analyses for wood burning do not include CO2 emissions. The renewable natural gas language in S5 enables the continued flow of fossil gas in Vermont through 2050. S5's reliance on biofuels, primarily from Nebraska and Kansas, assures increasing land conversion and pressure on rural lands. Weatherization should come first. S5 does not require this. Heat pumps should only be put in homes after they have been weatherized. Many Vermont homes are not suitable for cost-effective heat pump installations. Weatherization, heat pumps, and advanced wood heating require large upfront costs for low and moderate income Vermonters. Those costs have not been addressed in S5. Some areas of Vermont's electric distribution grid are not able to handle the envisioned increase in electrification. It is unfortunate that the legislature's Global Warming Solution Act put a mandate only on emissions reductions and did not give equal value to resilience, biodiversity, and climate change adaptation. I offer you a quote from author Charles Eisenstein. "There is an emerging understanding among many environmentalists that we have made a scientific, strategic, rhetorical, and political error by reducing the ecological crisis to climate and the climate crisis to carbon." Those are the areas where the legislature should be devoting attention. If the clean heat standard was a good idea for Vermont to evaluate at this time, Vermonters for a Clean Environment would be all in favor. As it is written, and given what is happening in Vermont right now, we ask you to recognize, as House Speaker Obahowski did when he ended the electricity utility deregulation legislation, that as proposed, this complicated policy is not in the best interest of Vermonters and is not the immediate focused action Vermonters are asking you to take with the monies already appropriated and available. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Do members have questions? Not seeing any. Thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Laura Height, Director of Partnership for Policy Integrity.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Sheldon and members of the committee for inviting me to testify today. For the record, my name is Laura Height. I am the U.S. Policy Director for the Partnership for Policy Integrity. Dr. Mary Booth is the director, and I'm not. I'm listed as the director, I think, in the agenda. And our focus is on biomass energy. I'm going to be testifying against the inclusion of advanced wood heating and biomass district heating in S5. And what I'd like to do is switch over to my PowerPoint presentation, and I'll turn my camera off so that I can preserve bandwidth. Why is this not working? Give me a second. Thought I was all set up. Okay. Excuse me, I thought I was all teed up. Let's just get this going from the beginning. Okay, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So the Partnership for Policy Integrity is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Massachusetts. We were founded in 2010 primarily to combat the misinformation of the biomass industry and to advocate for science-based and ecologically sound public policy.
So if you, excuse me, if you think, we can't see any presentation if that's your intention.
Oh, it is my intention. Can you see it now?
No, we can't.
Oh dear. Okay.
Probably
Well,
because you turned your camera off. I wonder if you need to turn it back on.
this worked before. Can you, do you see it?
See you now.
All right, I apologize. Let me just go back. I might not have properly hit share screen. And I do apologize for taking the committee's time up on this. So, do you see this now?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it,
All right, there I go, wasting time. I'll just go straight to our take-home points in terms of our recommendations, and I did submit some proposed markups that would implement these changes. The most glaring omission that we see in S5 is the absence of any health-based standards. And I think this is appropriate, obviously, because wood heating is very polluting, but also because this is called the Affordable Heat Act. And when people lose time from work, when they're sick, when they have their lives cut short because of exposure to pollution, that's a cost. And it's very significant in Vermont. Jared Ulmer from the Vermont Health Department testified before the Senate committee saying that Vermont is experiencing an estimated $100 to $240 million cost each year from wood burning. So it's very significant. Absolutely, we support what previous people have spoken, that we should prioritize weatherization. That's your biggest bang for the buck. And I'm going to both testify on why we think you should remove eligibility for wood burning and biofuels, but also to present some suggestions for, if you are going to include it, how to put some very sensible guardrails on that's use. So I'm going to just move forward. There's a theory, and I loved the false premise concept that was presented earlier, that biomass energy is carbon neutral. Because you burn the trees, then the CO2 gets in the atmosphere, and then the trees reabsorb the CO2, and it's a beautiful thing, as opposed to fossil emissions, which go straight up from the ground into the atmosphere. This is truly a false premise. This would only be a true premise if the carbon released from the burning wood were instantaneously absorbed by new trees that sprouted up instantaneously. In reality, carbon emissions from burning wood exceed fossil fuel emissions for decades to over a century. The reality scenario is there's a triple whammy from biomass energy. You're both releasing a very large pulse of carbon emissions right away when you burn it, and each ton of biomass burned emits about a ton of CO2. You're also decreasing the forest capacity to absorb that CO2. And on the third, any incentives that are going to renewable energy that go to biomass energy as opposed to truly clean energy is a setback for our overall climate goals to reduce emissions. The IPCC has said we need to slash carbon emissions in the next decade, and also that we do need more trees to absorb this excess carbon. So really, any policies that incentivize burning wood for energy are bad for the climate. Just as an example, your average wood burning power plant emits out the stack 50 to 60% more carbon than coal plants. Massachusetts did a study in 2010 looking at net carbon emissions, looking at life cycle carbon emissions from burning wood versus burning fossil fuels. And you can see from their analysis, which did include the biogenic fuel impacts, not just the fossil impacts, that burning wood, as opposed to, say, natural gas for electricity, would result in increased carbon emissions for over 90 years. We don't have that time to fight climate change. And what's missing from this chart is the other comparison to solar or wind, where really it's indefinite, the excess emissions from burning wood compared to clean energy technologies. Now, the Burlington Electric Department claims that their McNeil biomass power plant is carbon neutral or net zero emissions, but they're doing this because they're not counting the CO2 emissions from the burning of the wood. So as you see in this chart, they're counting just the fossil input from cutting the wood, transporting the wood, perhaps processing the wood, a little bit of fossil fuel that's used in actually running the plant. And they're not counting most of the emissions from that plant. So when they say that they're so much cleaner than the New England fuel grid, that's really not true. In fact, when you add in all of their carbon emissions, their emissions are more than 3 times what the power would be from the grid. And we're continuing to work to clean up the grid. The other argument that Burlington makes is that because the forest overall is growing more than they're cutting, that means that there is an instantaneous uptake of the carbon. And it's just completely not the way scientists do life cycle analysis for biomass energy. There is a net loss in the forest's ability to store and uptake carbon whenever you cut a tree. And the IPCC, which is even in this legislation kind of misinterpreted, does not automatically consider biomass energy as carbon neutral. This is basically inappropriate interpretation that the biomass industry has advanced. The McNeil generating plant, as you know, operates at about 26% efficiency, which means that most of the energy is wasted. In comparison, coal plants, which we're not recommending, are 33% efficient, but natural gas is 43% efficient. I'm just suggesting this because if you do want to still include district heating as an eligible technology, the appropriate thing would be to provide some sort of efficiency criteria, such as what's been done in Massachusetts and Washington, the United Kingdom, and other places where they typically would only allow biomass to qualify for any sort of renewable energy subsidies if they meet certain threshold of 60 or 65% efficiency comparable to a natural gas plant, a modern, efficient natural gas plant. I also want to talk about the health impacts from burning wood from biomass power plants are, comparable to coal plants in terms of their emissions of carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds. They are the only thing that coal plants would be worse for, and even not in all cases, it'd be sulfur dioxide. So they are highly polluting on top of the greenhouse gas impacts. And this is a concern, of course, to the local area. Winooski, as you know, is one of the environmental justice communities in Vermont, and they are already suffering from very bad environmental conditions, in particular air pollution. Again, going back to the health impacts of wood, the wood heating is probably the major source of the biomass emissions in Vermont. Jared Ulmer, again, I just, that point struck me so profoundly, the cost, the health cost, the human health cost of the health impacts, and that's direct health impacts. So there's also the indirect health impacts from work loss, and so many other areas from burning wood. Now, most of that is from wood heating. I think I've heard about 93% of that is from wood heating, but it's still a significant impact for the people surrounding the plant in Winooski.
We do need to kind of wrap up soon.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize if I'm dragging on. I just want to bring your attention to, there have been some studies recently, NESCAM, which the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation is part of, and then subsequently confirmed by the US EPA, that the residential wood heating, these advanced wood heating units are not clean, and the certification program is not working. Yeah, actually I'm coming up to the end, which was a recommendation to add public health protections. We totally support eligible measures 1 through 6, would suggest delaying inclusion of 8 if you need to, because there's a lot of new standards coming down the pike, and removing combustion-based renewable energy from number 9. If you are going to include biofuels and wood, the life cycle analysis needs to include both fossil fuel emissions and biogenic fuel emissions. So thank you very much for your time, and I apologize if I went over.
Thank you for your testimony. Members have questions? Yeah, Representative Pat?
Just to note that the bill that we're considering does not deal with electric generation at all. And that most of the testimony was, I mean, she got to pellet heating and stuff like that at the end, but there's nothing in the bill that promotes the use of biomass for electric generation.
Well, no, that's correct. But I thought the committee would already have heard this concern, which is that the Burlington Electric Department wants to expand the McNeil plant. They want to create a district heating proposal where they sell the steam off-site to UVM and other nearby locations, which would make it both an electric and a heat unit, and then would be eligible under that item 9 under the district heating. And there's a lot of concern about that. I've spoken with a lot of citizens in Winooski, in particular, who are very, very concerned about the impacts of that expansion proposal. And it would be financially benefited from this AHA, this S5.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. Members, we're going to take a 10-minute break. A little space here for stretch our legs.